Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream introduces two major plot arcs in the first act. The first is a classic love triangle, and the second is a group of craftsmen who aspire to the art of theater. Along the way, it characterizes love as a conflict. It characterizes love as unreasonable, as a product of imagination, as an expression of control. It communicates a lot of thoughts about love. And today, we're going to move through that act, play by play, to get a sense of how Shakespeare sets up some of those major themes and plot lines in one of the most famous comedies of all time. This video is part of a larger series of videos on A Midsummer Night's Dream, so if this seems like your kind of thing, please subscribe. And with that said, let's dig into Act 1. Act 1 starts with Theseus complaining about the moon. He is to be married with the new arrival of the new moon, and this old moon is moving too slowly for him. This, right away, links the moon with love by linking it to marriage. And the moon, as Theseus's complaints make clear, is constantly changing. In the course of this play, the characters are going to change who they love frequently, and that mutable quality of love is set up right in the opening lines. Theseus is to be married in this play, and his soon-to-be wife, Hippolyta, is a warrior, an Amazon queen to be exact. We also learn in these opening lines that Theseus wooed her with his sword and won her love doing her injuries. They came together in war, so love is characterized as a battle. Love is a battlefield, to quote Pat Benatar. He wants to marry her, he says, in another key. The wedding won't be a competition, it'll be fun. It'll have mirth. He tells his minister of fun to get everybody excited for it. Athens should get ready to laugh and feel joy. And then Aegeus enters the play. Aegeus has a problem. His daughter Hermia doesn't want to marry the dude that he's picked for her. He wants his daughter to marry Demetrius, but she's in love with Lysander. And why exactly does he want her to marry Demetrius? That actually remains unclear. Is he from a more noble family? No. Is he wealthier? Nope. When comparing himself to Demetrius, Lysander says that he is as well derived as he, as well possessed. My love is more than his. My fortunes, every way, as fairly ranked, if not with vantage, as Demetrius's. So they're pretty equal in all of that stuff. Indeed, choosing between them on the stage should appear totally arbitrary. The direction of love in this play is unreasonable. Aegeus prefers Demetrius. Hermia prefers Lysander. For the audience, they should appear exactly the same. Often, theatrical productions will make it difficult to distinguish between the two. The closest that Aegeus comes to an explanation for why he thinks his daughter should marry Demetrius is that she is mine. He goes further to decree that he may dispose of her which shall be either to this gentleman or to her death. Like, this is clearly about control above anything else. She'll either listen to him or she'll die. So we could say that Aegeus wants Hermia for himself. He wants proof of his control over her. So in that way, his preference for Demetrius isn't actually a preference for Demetrius, it's a preference for control over Hermia. One thing that we learn about Demetrius from Lysander is that he once seduced a woman named Helena only to leave her. So perhaps Aegeus wants to pair Hermia off with a man who might leave her. Then he'll have his daughter to himself again. Aegeus's love of Hermia is a toxic sort of love, the type of love that manifests in the desire for control. So maybe in this choice between equals, he prefers Demetrius to Lysander because he wants to maintain that control. And we can ask the same question about Hermia. If the two men are pretty equal in all these physical, materialistic ways, why does she prefer Lysander to Demetrius? Well, according to Aegeus, it's because he's tricked her. He's sung her poems, given her gifts. With cunning hast thou flinched my daughter's heart, he says. In other words, Lysander has put in the work. He's demonstrated that he loves her. So she prefers him because he gives her attention. So just to review our two couples so far, Theseus won Hippolyta through force. Lysander, according to Aegeus, won Hermia through cunning, through trickery. He bewitched her. In both cases, the implication is that the woman doesn't have a choice. The men act, they fight, they deceive, and the women are acted upon. They are conquered, they are bewitched. But that's not quite true, is it? Hippolyta is a warrior, she fought back, she wasn't passive in that. Hermia's preference for Lysander is just as arbitrary as Aegeus's preference for Demetrius. She's self-possessed and assertive in this opening scene. Surrounded by men with power, she claps back. When Theseus takes her father's side in this argument and says that Demetrius is a worthy gentleman, she claps back and says her own belief, so is Lysander. Theseus actually agrees with this point, which for me confirms that the two men are actually equal, but then Theseus says that the father's opinion tips the balance. Hermia does not bend, though. When Theseus confirms the father's judgment that she will either wed Demetrius or she will die, she remains firm. This is an unwished yoke, and her soul consents not to give sovereignty over to her lord. She's clearly not willing to accept her role as an object to be exchanged between men. The men want to see the women as passive objects, but they rebel against that categorization. They don't want to play that role. Hermia does not want to be cast in the role of the obedient daughter. Instead, she casts herself as the tragic hero. So in terms of personal identities, there are a few competing opinions in this scene. Everyone seems to agree that the two men are equals in almost every way on a physical level. So given a choice between two equals, what tips the balance? Lysander believes that Hermia's love should be the deciding factor, but Aegeus and Theseus believe that the deciding factor should be the father's love. Their father's, not her own. Lysander even says at one point to Demetrius, "You have her father's love, Demetrius. Let me have Hermia's. Do you marry him?" And Aegeus confirms this true. He says, "He hath my love." So on both sides, love is the thing that tips the balance, when everything else is equal. Hermia says pretty early on in the play that she wishes her father looked but with my eyes on Lysander. It's through her perception and her imagination that there is a difference between the two men. But that's also true of Aegeus. It is also through his perception and imagination that there is a difference. So Act 1 establishes this link between individual subjective perception, which we might be able to call imagination, and love. The eye sees a difference only because the imagination, guided by love, wants to see a difference. So this begs the question of whose perception is privileged above the others. Within the political logic of Athens, the father's perspective is privileged, so it's Hermia and Lysander against the world. The logic of the play, however, I think sides with them. We are on Hermia's side here. The practical implications of this decision result in Theseus giving Hermia 4 days to submit to her father's will. These are the same 4 days between this conversation and the day of Theseus's wedding. So it's not particularly looking good for the young couple. As Lysander says, the course of true love never did run smooth, but he also has a plan. He apparently has an aunt who lives far away, and if they run away together, they can marry safely there. So the star-crossed lovers have a plan, and with that plan, it's interesting to note that their language starts forming perfect rhyming couplets with each other. And then at this point, Hermia's childhood friend Helena enters the scene, and things get crazy. This Helena is the same Helena that once dated Demetrius and was left by him, and she's obviously still sore about it. Since Demetrius seems to desire Hermia now, Helena asks Hermia to teach her how to win back the love of Demetrius. But Hermia has no answers for her. She never pursued his love. In fact, she kind of hates him. Yet he follows her. Similarly, the more Helena loves Demetrius, the more he hates her. Love and attraction are strange and unpredictable things in this play. This might actually be the central theme of the whole play, the arbitrary and unpredictable nature of love. So at this point in Act 1, we have two women, Helena and Hermia, who seem pretty similar, and two men, Demetrius and Lysander, who seem pretty similar. 2 and 2. It's a pretty simple equation for the coupling that comedy requires. Yet the equation is unequal. Hermia has the love of 2 men, while Helena has the love of 0. This is going to have to change for the play to end in comedy. Hermia tells Helena not to worry. She will be taken out of the equation soon enough. She tells Helena of her plan to leave with Lysander, and as part of that explanation, Hermia continues to develop this theme that connects perception and imagination with love. She says that before she met Lysander, she saw Athens as a paradise, but that loving him hath turned heaven unto a hell. Love has changed the way that she sees Athens in the same way that love has changed the way that she sees Lysander. The existence of love affects the way her eyes see the world. This relationship between love and the way that we see will continue to develop as the play moves on. And there's one other thing to take note of here. Hermia says that the place where she and Lysander will meet is the same place that her and Helena used to meet when they were young friends. She tells Helena that she will meet Lysander in the wood where often you and I upon faint primrose breads were wont to lie, emptying our bosoms of their counsels sweet. So it seems that Helena's role in Hermia's life is being replaced by Lysander. She once met Helena there, now she meets Lysander. Act 1, Scene 1 is not good to Helena. After that, Hermia and Lysander exit the scene and Helena is left on the stage to address the audience. She tells us that through Athens she is thought as fair as Hermia, meaning that they're also equals. So we've got two dudes who are basically the same and two women who are basically the same. Only the love and imagination of those looking at them can differentiate them. She then extends this idea through the allegorical figure of Cupid, saying, love looks not with the eye, but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. That Cupid depends on the imagination. Love depends on imagination. Ultimately, the plan that she comes to during this soliloquy is that she will tell Demetrius of Hermia's plan, and hopefully he'll be grateful. Hopefully, he'll give her some attention. So in short, Act 1, Scene 1 seems to set up a tragedy. We've got star-crossed lovers, a daughter threatened with death. The course of love is not running smooth at all. But in Scene 2, finally, we get to laugh a little bit during this comedy. Peter Quince and his aspiring theater troupe want to prepare a play for the big wedding. It should be noted that none of them are actors. Quince, for example, is a carpenter, Bottom is a weaver, Snout is a tinker, and so on. The play they are performing is described as the most lamentable comedy and most cruel death of Pyramus and Thisbe. It's the story of Pyramus and Thisbe, which, if you don't know, is basically the story of Romeo and Juliet. Their parents don't want them to be together, so they just run away. So you might be realizing that this is essentially the same story that was set up in Act 1, Scene 1. It's a storyline that usually ends in tragedy, so it's notable that they call it a lamentable comedy. And the story of Pyramus and Thisbe is actually a tragedy, and to call it a comedy, even a lamentable one, that's a curious decision. It's also a curious selection to be performed at a wedding. No one wants to see the story of lovers who die during a wedding celebration. So given that strange context, Peter Quince sets out to give the players their parts. He starts by giving Bottom the part of Pyramus, the lover who kills himself for love. And Bottom, to put it mildly, is eager for that task. And then Quince gives the role of Thisbe to Flute, who is upset with the assignment. He doesn't want to play a woman because he has a beard coming in. Quince dismisses this concern by saying that Flute can wear a mask, and Bottom, hearing that the part will be played with a mask, volunteers to play the part of Thisbe as well. Basically, he wants to play the part of both Pyramus and Thisbe. Imagine wanting to play both Romeo and Juliet. That's Bottom. Quince, of course, says, no, you must play Pyramus. And at this point, it might be clear what Shakespeare is doing here. He's teaching us how to read his own play. Great literature will do that. It'll teach you how to read it. In the first act, Egeus is clearly attempting to assign himself the role of director, who chooses what parts Demetrius and Hermia will play. Not wanting to play those parts, Hermia casts herself as the star-crossed lover. Lysander casts himself as the hero who will rescue Hermia, and with two nearly identical women and two nearly identical men, the roles they play in the story are arbitrary. Who gets to choose what role we play in our own lives? The presence of this play within the bigger play forces us to ask that exact question. Like, in this casting scene, Scene 2, we see actors aspiring to be cast in certain roles and roles being assigned to them. Bottom must play the role of Pyramus, just as Lysander must play the role of the hero. But Nick Bottom doesn't just want to play Pyramus and Thisbe, he also wants to play every other character as well. When Snug is assigned to the role of Lion, he says he'll play the lion as well. When Quince says that he would roar too loudly and he'd scare everybody in the audience, Bottom says no, he'll roar you gently as a suckling dove. He will roar you and twir any nightingale. Bottom is just there to please. He will do whatever you want him to do. Each of the players in this scene are focused on themselves and concerned about the part that they will play, just as the characters in scene 1 were all focused on the part that they will play in the drama of their own life. So all of that stuff has been set up in Act 1, and we haven't even seen the fairies yet. That's all stuff that happens in Act 2. Which we will discuss in the next part of this series. Please subscribe to be notified when that is published, and for all future seasons of Shakespeare Play-by-Play, thank you for watching.